From Nox's first fight, Team Soul's first match, and Jegal's utter annihilation of his first victim, opponent, so much amazing stuff was in this episode. So I don't want to waste any time, let's just get into God of High School Episode 7, Anima/Force. So for the pre-opening scene this week, it was just a very brief scene, and it was the same scene that was shown in last episode with Mujin talking about God of High School, saying that the whole tournament is really about borrowing power from gods. As he's talking about the real reason for the God of High School tournament, we see visuals of Ilpio, Jegal, and Commissioner Q, since these are the people that we've seen use Chariok so far in the story. Unlike previous weeks, this pre-opening scene was only around 10 or 15 seconds or so. It was a lot shorter, but we actually did get something a bit different in the opening. There were some changes in the latter half of the opening, and it was basically just the new competitors and removal of the old ones. So we didn't see Sungchul, Manseok, or Ma Binseon. Instead, we saw some of the new people that would be fighting in the national tournament. We also had an extended focus on Ilpio, Jegal, Q, and O, as well as the other commissioners, and then we got some quick headshots of the other 6 members which were revealed in last episode. As I just said, the changes were only in the second half of the opening. The rest of the visuals remained primarily the same. Even with the introduction of these new fighters, they were still drawn in the same style as the old opening, and they had the same neon color effects that the rest of the characters had. The song also remained the same, and there were no other real differences in the opening. After the opening, the first match of the national tournament is announced, and it's Team Chung versus our protagonist, Team Soul. The format of this tournament is a team format in 1v1s. The first team to 2 wins wins the match, and each teammate can choose to fight multiple times or switch out after their match. The first fight was Jidong versus Mori. Mori pokes his pressure points and starts talking about how he's unlocked his true self, and by poking the pressure points he can bring out his apparent true power. But unfortunately for Mori, he hit the wrong pressure points, paralyzing himself, leaving him wide open for a quick and easy win for Jidong. After this quick match, we go to a more serious tone as the next match is announced as Pum Kwang versus Daiwi. But right after the match is announced, we cut back to the scene from the end of last episode. It's Drake, the man that killed the blind announcer, versus Judge Q. Drake is laughing maniacally after stabbing Judge Q through the stomach, but then his arm suddenly flies off and Q's Joker appears with his theme music picking up. Another cool thing about this scene is that Q actually takes off his band, which was actually there to limit his strength rather than just monitor it, and as soon as he took his band off, his GP jumped to 2,500. Then we go back to the fight with Pum Kwang and Daiwi, and that's another thing about this episode, and it was like this too in the webtoon. We get a lot of flashbacks and different things intertwined. It's not just one fight after another. Most of these things are happening simultaneously, and I actually like it, and it makes the show a lot more interesting. When the fight resumes, Pum Kwang is throwing Daiwi around using his own original fighting style called working man style. He developed this fighting style through his time working his construction job. And just as he's about to hit Daiwi again, Daiwi starts his dance of the 4 gods. Even though it's looking rough for Pum Kwang since Daiwi just started this attack, his teammate reassures the audience saying that he's someone that would never give up and wouldn't lose like this, and then emotional music starts playing and we get another flashback. The flashback is of Pum Kwang and his relationship with his teammates. Pum Kwang is working at his construction job while studying for his high school entrance exam. Jidong pulls up and hands Pum Kwang studying materials so he can further prepare for his entrance exam. When he's studying, a group of girls start making fun of him for being an old man studying for a high school exam, since it's something that he should have done when he was a lot younger. And then his teammate Jongmi watches and says that she'll never be a failure like him. Unfortunately, as soon as she said that, we skip a few hours into the future where she loses a fencing match and she breaks down thinking she's a failure like the man she saw, and she breaks her sword in anger. When she starts loathing, Pum Kwang shows up and encourages her that she can do better and repairs the sword and tells her to never give up, just the basic encouragement. And the next day when Pum Kwang is studying, Jongmi shows up and helps him study for the exam. Flashback ends, the inspirational music picks up, and things are looking really good for Pum Kwang. It really seems like he's gonna be able to win the fight, and he's almost built like the protagonist of the fight, with Daiwi being more neutral or even a villain win in this case. But unfortunately for Pumpkwing, we all know where this is gonna go. It's really unlikely that Team Seoul is gonna lose their first ever match in the national tournament, but despite this, Pumpkwing still puts on a pretty convincing performance. He summons his Chariot, Thor's hammer, and hits Daiwi with it, and he gets blown back. They have a little bit of a struggle, but Daiwi eventually uses his fourth stance, shattering the hammer and winning the fight. After the fight ends, we go back to Q and Drake, and they're still going at it, since all of these fights are really happening simultaneously. Q slices off another one of Drake's arm, but Drake just starts laughing, revealing his Chariot takes the form of a centipede and sews his limbs back on after they're cut off. But Q is completely fearless. Knowing that Drake can sew himself back together, he concludes that he just has to cut Drake into pieces small enough to where he can't repair himself. When Q charges, he's about to land the killing blow, but two more Nox members show up. It's the team of Priest, the blue-haired boy Ivanovic, and the pink-haired girl Saturn. Ivanovic uses his natural treasure, growing wings, and starts mocking Drake, saying that his team was the one sent to assassinate Q, and questions why Drake's even there in the first place. He picks up the girl Saturn and they fly at Q, and Q actually seems to be in a bad way here, that he might actually lose the fight and be the next dead commissioner, but this time O appears, preventing the killing blow. We jump back to the tournament to get the last set of the first match, and it's Mira versus Jongmi. They're both female swordsmen, and they have a pretty standard fight as they're both using wooden swords, so nothing too crazy goes on. Not too long into the fight, Mira ends up cutting straight through Jongmi's sword, but Jongmi summons her Chariot sword called Bastard and launches a slash on Mira. But before we get to see what happens, we cut back to the commissioner's fight, and everything starts popping off. O's flying everywhere, doing flips, Saturn's using her cross to shoot something, and she even has a small beam clash with O, and it looks like Nox has the upper hand and are about to kill O. Then he reveals his Chariot, which is a giant red dragon which wrapped itself around the whole building and crawled in through the window. Saturn gets really annoyed at these developments, breaks her lollipop, and starts swearing up a storm, so it's shown that the only reason she had that in her mouth was to prevent her foul mouth from coming out. As she's having her temper tantrum with O, Q stabs through Ivanovic's stomach, and then we go back to the fight between Jongmi and Mira. Jongmi uses her giant Chariot sword, cuts through Mira's wooden sword, but then Mira jumps on top of it, kicking her, winning the match, and then we go back to what we really want to see, the fight between the commissioners. O continues the fight with Saturn, and Q continues his fight with Ivanovic. Q and O both get decisive hits, so Ivanovic picks up Saturn and they fly away. Right after they escape, Drake blows up, and the fate of the judges is unclear. Then we go back to the tournament with Team Seoul celebrating their win. They're pretty excited, but it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal since none of the team's fights were that hard. We also see the losing team trying to encourage each other that it's not a big deal they lost and they can pick themselves back up and continue on in life. But me personally as a viewer, there wasn't a lot of connection that I felt with the losing team, so I didn't really feel anything when they were having this talk. And just like Team Seoul, it felt like a really non-consequential win as it was just the first round and the teams that they faced was pretty much fodder. After their celebration, there are sirens and a news team is covering the explosion in Q's apartment. Even though we weren't sure about the fate of Q and O after the explosion, they're both chilling near an ambulance and they're both perfectly fine with barely any scratches. They call Mujin and tell him about the situation, and he concludes that there must be a traitor among the 6 or commissioners, implying that it's more than likely that the traitor is amongst the commissioners. They also go over a report and see that Nox has captured Taijin and taken him somewhere after seeing a picture of Taijin's arm being ripped off and laying on the ground after his encounter with the Nox leader in last week's episode. Then the tournament resumes with Yangsong versus Joola, and the first fight is Jegal versus Jugok. I don't really know if I can call this a fight or a massacre or a murder or whatever, but anyway, let's just get into the fight. So Jugok pulls out his little wand, starts drawing something that looks like an alchemy circle, and starts reading out his spell for his little magic fireball, but instantly a tooth pierces him and a shark appears behind him and starts chewing on him. This scene was just brutal. The perspective is almost like outside of the shark's mouth, and we just see Jugok's legs bouncing up and down as blood starts pouring out of him and he's shaking, being thrown around in the shark's mouth. His teammate can't believe what's going on and jumps in and attacks Jegal, but she is also instantly pierced with a shark tooth through her stomach and ruthlessly stepped on by Jegal. Mori and Mira are just watching in awe, and Mira stands in front of Mori telling him not to interfere or else they'll all be disqualified since he'd already done it. But to Mira's dismay, instead of Mori, this time it's Daiwi. He sprints into the ring, kicking Jegal, stopping him from attacking Jugok's teammate, but the announcer stops their little skirmish from continuing any further. And to my surprise, Jugok gets up and uses his strongest lightning bolt attack on Jegal. It looked like a brutal attack. It was a really thick beam of lightning that just came down and zapped Jegal for a solid 5 seconds, but it ultimately did nothing. Jegal speed blitzes him, punching him in the stomach, reopening his wound, then summons a shark behind him while he's in the air. But the episode fades to the ending with the disturbing sound of crunching and Jegal screaming. So I'm pretty sure Jegal is dead, but we'll see next week. This episode was nuts. Stuff started popping off and it was action-packed throughout. It seems like I'm saying this every week, but the episodes keep getting better, and this was probably the best one yet, with the fighting, world development, and character interactions. If you have any suggestions for future videos or just love God of High School, leave it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.